This is the fastest growing music industry in the world.
What do you think are the challenges to get us to where Latin music is today?
Artists who are achieving the same successes aren't receiving the same payout.
He's one of the top producers in the region. This Jordanian producer is a trailblazer in producing Arab indie pop and is sort of like the godfather for independent artists. Nasir AlBashir.
Hello.
The song Rajieen. What was the experience like putting the song together?
It was a song about our strength, our solidarity, our resistance, our anger. We were shadow banned. There's no illusion in my mind that there is definitely one voice that's protected more than the other.
Welcome to another episode on Yalla, Let's Talk, where we are designed to change the narrative and amplify different voices. Today we have with us my friend, Nasir AlBashir.
Hello.
Habibi. Nasir. It's such a pleasure to finally have this conversation. I need to give you a fist bump.
The pleasure is all mine, Habibi. To kind of an intro.
Habibi, man, no, the intro is not even kind enough. There's so much I can talk about, and you're one of those characters I've always been intrigued by. I met you a couple of years ago, and you were telling me your story, how you got into music, and I just want to ask and start the podcast with that question. How did you get into producing music?
Well, so first off, thank you guys for having me. I love the work you do. I love everything you guys have been doing for the past few years. And I was telling you before we started rolling, I want it on camera, that it's so important to have people talking about, the world from an Arab perspective. And the fact that you're not based here and still are doing that is something that I have massive props to. I appreciate all the work that you're doing. Thinking about how I started music, I've been playing music since I was a kid. My mom, very, very early on got me into piano lessons, the violin, the guitar, and I was very, very, very quickly realized that that's something that I love to do. And after I finished my undergrad, I started touring with Aziz Maraka, with Hana Malhas, with Akhil Zafir, and kind of working with their bands, in some cases helping with arrangement, figuring some things out. And I realized that, there is something in being in this kind of there's a scene here that we can kind of work with. And at one point because I was supposed to be in law school at that point. And I was doing a show with Aziz Maraka in Egypt. It was Red Bull في الشارع. And after that show, I realized I love this, dude. I love this. That's all I want to do. So I applied to Berkeley. And while I was in the same evening, while I was still in Egypt, and got admitted before I was back in Amman. And that was a conversation with my parents. And hey, I'm going to Berkeley. And they're like, what? And that was a great program, this 1-year master's program where we were doing kind of figuring out production, but I also got to learn about the business, make some connections, and I even got an internship with a producer in LA who had produced Beyonce and won a couple of Grammys. But halfway through my semester, I got a phone call and my uncle had passed away. So, so I had to fly back to Amman, for the funeral, and COVID was just starting. So flew back to Amman, and it's like I locked the airport behind me, and they blocked flights for the next 8 months, and we were stuck in Jordan, and the internship went away, and it was about figuring out what to do next. So I was very lucky to get my hands on this place with the help of a friend and the kind patronage of Zay Khouri. And I started producing artists for free. He's like, hey, have you thought about trying to do this, trying to do that? I worked with Hana, I worked with Aziz again. We did a song called Rajieen. And then kind of one thing led to another, and here we are today.
And then here you are today. Yeah. Well, what an amazing organic story.
Yeah,
so everything kind of fell into place.
Very much so.
And also, congrats on the studio. It's an amazing spot. If you guys can see it, this is where all the magic happens, where all the big hits you're seeing.
Yeah, cheers.
Yeah.
Welcome. Join us.
So something you mentioned, and I want to dive a little deeper into it, is that you came here and you started helping these artists releasing this new genre of music that you started producing in the region. Can you tell me a little bit more about what is indie Arab pop and what are your predictions for this genre?
Well, I don't like labels because I don't I think what's happening here, not just in the studio but across the region, is that you're finding a number of artists who are creating a category. The opening pitch, really, whenever we started working with artists here, was, what would you like to make? What do you listen to? Because theoretically, not theoretically, really, on the ground, when I'm talking to my friends, a lot of the things that I used to realize before I produced was like, it's either Arab night, or it's Arabic night, or it's the rest, and I always found that confusing, because like, why can't those tracks kind of be together on a playlist? So that was kind of the opening pitch of like, okay, so let's explore that. What happens if you make Arabic R&B? What happens if you make Arabic reggaeton? What happens if you make, if you try and twist Justin Bieber into an Arabic style, Shawn Mendes, all of that. So we started to kind of just see, what happens if you try to, I don't want to call it fuse them, but if you build Arabic music on a new set of rules.
So something you mentioned, and I want to just go a little deeper into that. You mentioned that there's no real labels for Arab, indie pop, and it's whatever you want it, you can call it. Tell me a little bit more about that.
Yeah. So one of the things that got me really excited about producing the music that we're producing nowadays, and one of my biggest issues with Arabic music, although I love Arabic music, is that there aren't really genres. I mean, if there are, they're few and far between. But I mean, I feel like it's a few artists who really broke the mold. So what we're trying to do here is, and what I feel like the region is trying to do, this is definitely not my project on my own, is kind of introduce genres into Arabic music. So what does Arabic R&B sound like? What does Arabic reggaeton sound like? What does Arabic trap sound like? How do you fuse, the rules of the music from the region, Siskiyas, Maqam Bayat, Maqam Hijaz, to the rules and let's call it the processes that they apply to music elsewhere.
Wow, I love that. That's very creative, like bringing two different types of styles of music and trying to combine them and make something magical happen.
Yeah, see what you end up with.
And see what you end up with.
It's definitely throw things at the wall and see what sticks kind of situation for sure. Yeah.
Amazing. So I want to ask you a little bit more questions. If I was an artist right now,
yeah,
and I wanted to come to Nasir, and I want to be like, Nasir, can you help me produce a song? What would the conversation look like if that artist came to you?
Well, the first question we ask you is, why are you here? Like, what do you want? Because I think not every artist wants the same thing, and I don't think the process to getting there is the same. So if you're here saying, hey, listen, I want to be the next, Ed Sheeran, then okay, that takes a process. I want to be, the next Saad Mjarrad, that takes I want to be myself and I just have a message that I want to get out there. That's a different process. So it really depends on the first question, and the most important question is, who are you and who do you want to communicate? Because what's an artist? It's someone who's taking in the world and then giving it back as it's seen through their eyes. And so to a certain extent, the first question and the most important question is, who are you? What do you stand for? And what are you trying to communicate? And then the process from there onwards is, okay, let's make sure that the music communicates that consistently. Once we build that, then we talk about, let's make sure your image conveys that consistently. So, because I mean, if you look edgy as hell, but you're singing, the brightest love songs, then something's just not clicking. And then let's make sure your communication also communicates that effectively. Because what you're doing is you're telling a story. It's really like reading a book in the sense of, let's say you're watching Game of Thrones. Okay. Game of Thrones has dragons and White Walkers and so on and so forth, but you believe Ned Stark when he speaks. You relate to the story that he's saying. And as soon as you have something that you can attach to there, you are ready to accept the entirety of the rest of the premise. So being an artist is kind of the same thing. How do I make sure that there is that core that's relatable to every man or whoever your target audience is? And then build on that. And at that point, you can start experimenting because I know who your core is and where that stands. So finding that is usually the most time-consuming process and usually the most frustrating.
It's most frustrating. It's trying to figure out who you are. Do you have any advice for an artist who is trying to figure out who they are?
Don't fake it.
Don't fake it.
Don't fake it. You don't need a deep story to relate to people. People have everyday problems, and talking about everyday things will connect. But don't try and follow something that you think is right, or that you think will lead you towards a viewership. Because at the end of the day, number one is you're not going to be able to keep it up for very long. You'll get exposed or you'll get exhausted, but one of the two is going to happen. And the other side of it is that there's no need to, if everyone's following a certain, formula of what's right or what you should talk about, or eventually we're going to reface the problem we had initially, is that, everyone's doing the same thing. But in reality, if even 1% of people listen to you in the world, that's 100 million people. You have 100 million people following along to whatever it is you're saying. And I'm sure you're not more than 1% will relate to what it is that you have to say. So there's a target audience for everything. It's a lot better if you're honest about it and you're vulnerable, because it'll lead to a longer lasting
I love that.
career.
I love how authenticity is at the forefront of you being an artist.
I don't think there's another way to do it.
There's no other way to do it. And you can see that with a lot of upcoming artists or established artists. The more that they're real, the more people connect with them. And then there is an audience for their authenticity.
I agree.
Now, my follow-up question to that, I'm an artist. I am now testing different sounds. I want to do a little bit of R&B. I love R&B, but hey, I like some Afrobeats. Or maybe, hey, I like this kind of style of music. Maybe I want to do Arabic electronic.
Awesome.
How can an artist decide which genre to pick without confusing themselves?
See, that's a really interesting question, because, and don't take anything I'm saying as gospel. These are just beliefs. But I think at the end of the day, the genre is a lane. It's the model of car you're driving. Mm-hmm. But really what matters is the driver. So take if you have any artist, the concept, the central point is the core. Who's singing? What are they singing about? What's their message? What's their vibe? Zayn's take on Afrobeats is going to be very different than Mishal Tamer, for instance, or Adham or Saint Laurent. All four of them could make an Afrobeat track. It's going to sound very different regardless of who's singing it. So I wouldn't really ever tell someone don't constrict yourself, or constrict yourself into a genre, or like if you're making this genre, then you should keep making this genre. What you need to stay consistent with is your artistic style. So let's say you're an artist who has a tendency to make darker sounding music, then it would follow that your Afrobeat is probably going to sound a little bit darker. And if you're making the brightest, happiest kind of vibe, then that Afrobeat is going to sound bright and happy. But what roots me at the end of the day, it's not the production, it's not the song, it's the artist. It really is the singer, not the song. So yeah, explore. Do your electro track and your Afro track and try it out. Just put it out there.
I love that. And I think this is for a lot of people who might be artists or who might be interested in this world, that they're going to take notes on this fact, is that it's not about picking different genres, it's having a consistent sound.
Yeah.
Right? And Nasir, thank you very much for sharing this. You mentioned before about the region and about how music is starting to come up and these new genres are starting to come up. Yeah. I wanted to ask you, as someone who's been in the industry for a couple of years now, what is your take and prediction on what's happening with Arab pop or this new genre of music that's coming out?
It's a big question. I think, first things first, it's worthy of note that this is the fastest growing music industry in the world. And this isn't me saying that, these are the stats. It grows, I think it's growing at, the last time I checked, 35% year on year. The next biggest market is growing at 16. Yeah, so you're talking about a massive surge in Arabic music. And I think that... And
sorry, is it Arabic music in general, or is it like traditional Arabic music?
No, the Arabic music industry, where no matter what falls under that umbrella. So I think that we're about to see that Arabic music is at, I'm not going to say the forefront, but I feel like we are, remember when Shakira released Whenever, Wherever?
Yeah.
I think that's where we are right now in terms of the growth of Arabic music in the world. So Latin American music was, put at the forefront and then grew insanely over the next 10 years. I think that's what we're living right now. I don't know if we'll be the top music industry, but I definitely know we're going to be in the running as a recognized, you know, area or region in music. So I think it's an exciting time to be here. We're definitely building. I don't think we're there yet. I think it'll be a couple of years before we are. But I'm very excited by not just the developments in music, but the developments in the artists themselves and the way they're thinking about their craft. I think there's finally a light at the end of the tunnel for artists who aren't under labels. And it's one that, you know, if you say, listen, I am a talented, hardworking, long-sighted individual, long-sighted, was an artist with vision, basically. There's actually a point in your trying, which I can't comfortably say was the case 10 years ago.
Amazing. So you mentioned a couple of cool things. Number one, just the first thing when you mentioned Shakira, I'm like, yo, she's half Lebanese. She could have used that opportunity to give us a little bit of props, a little bit of a push. the second thing
she did actually when you stop and think
it's great for you. You're right with the belly dancing. Yeah, that's
she even sang in Arabic, if I'm not mistaken.
Did she actually? Oh, gotta check it out. But there is something to be said about where we are in the music industry right now, and we see it. We see it with the rise of so many different artists. We see it with Ileana. We see it with Zayn, Saint Levant. And I wanted to ask, when it comes to the region, what do you think are the challenges to get us to where Latin music is today?
I could spend an hour talking about this, but I'm gonna try and limit it to two things. So there's the industry side, and then there's the artist side. On the industry side, there's a bunch of things. Mainly, it's the fact that the Arab view pays less. That's a big one, because let's say I have, you know, 1 million streams in the US, it'll probably pay me about $6,000. If I have 1 million streams in the Arab world, it'll pay me $400. That makes a massive difference, because artists who are achieving the same successes aren't receiving the same payouts, which makes it very difficult to sustain a career, but it also makes it difficult to grow. And that's setting aside, you know, the rights issues, the enforcement of, you know, if my song is being played at a restaurant or a bar somewhere, is someone collecting? Performance rights organizations still haven't found their feet, but they're starting. But it's a process, and artists are kind of living with reaching milestone successes that, had they been anywhere else in the world, would have their entire game wrapped up by now. So that's one issue, and it's a difficult one. And it makes it difficult for not just the artists to make money, but the people who are also service providers. You know, they're photographers, they're producers, they're mix engineers, they're videographers, they're film. Also, they all can't get paid fair rates because the artist isn't making nearly enough money off their music to eat. That's a big one, and I think that's something we're going to see improvement over the next 2 years. But it's certainly a challenge, and artists need to find ways to go around to get their projects funded. Because it's something that's really important to think about, is that the Arab artist, yes, is competing with other Arab artists, but they're on a playlist with Western artists. They're on a playlist with artists from Africa. They're on a playlist with artists from India. So that's a competition. You can't shirk the quality just because you're from here, because you're competing with them. It's a global competition. So there is a major disadvantage where that's concerned. Money isn't flowing the way it should. I hope that's addressed sooner rather than later, but we're seeing moves that start to work towards that. But I mean, if you guys can help us, stream your artists on Spotify, stream your artists on YouTube, you know, because the payout makes a difference.
Keep listening to music.
You know, and listen to them on, you know, specific platforms in any of the DSPs. I'm not saying Spotify specifically.
So this is actually my follow-up question. So if monetization here, when it comes to streaming, isn't the way to go for artists, how do artists usually sustain themselves and fund projects?
With difficulty. That's really the answer. It's a lot of artists. I mean, it's about being smart. I mean, here's the thing. I was going to say there's an artist side to the problem. The reality is, all you need to make a hit record is a laptop and a microphone. And that's only if you sing. If you don't sing, then all you need is a laptop. There are ways around it. You don't need, you know, a Blackmagic camera to shoot a music video. You can shoot it on an iPhone. You don't need the most insane concept to sell over your music. If the song is good, it'll speak on its own. So one of the issues is that, on the one hand, if I'm an artist, especially in the Arab region, don't create obstacles for yourself. Don't set bars that in your head you believe this won't be good enough if it's not there. You can create incredible quality on no budget. Billie Eilish won a Grammy out of her bedroom. But there is kind of the other side to that, is that how do artists fund themselves? I think the artists who are making it nowadays are artists who are hustling, are artists who just found a way to make it work. Labels today won't sign you unless you have 200,000, 300,000, 400,000 followers, unless you have a couple of million streams on Spotify. It's about showing a proof of concept, because marketing is so easy nowadays. If it's not working for you, you're doing something wrong. So how are they funding? The answer is they aren't. The answer is that they're finding ways to get their message across as simply as possible. Maybe they have friends and family kind of pitching in to help, start that dream, but it's not a prerequisite by any stretch of the imagination. And I'll tell you from experience, sometimes artists come in here and say, hey, listen, I'll work a track on a collab deal with you. And I'll be, absolutely not. And sometimes artists walk in here I've never heard of, play a single demo, and I'm like, dude, I'll do this for free and I'll mix it and I'll figure it out for you, but you need to be out there. So if you're actually delivering quality, the people who are around you want to be involved. People want to be involved in successful projects. But if it's not working for you, the first person you should be looking at is yourself.
Damn. Wow.
You know what I mean?
That's a bar right there. I really respect the fact that it's that you mentioned that, because resources are important. We need resources to grow and scale.
Yeah.
At the same time, you're echoing the thought process or the mindset that, hey, we don't have the resources just yet. Don't let that be an excuse. Don't let that be a barrier. Billie Eilish, you said, won a Grammy from her bedroom. Yeah. And you can create so much just from simple things. You don't have to go above and beyond just to create stuff.
Absolutely. And I think the people who are killing it nowadays kind of followed that route.
Thank you very much for sharing that, Nasir.
Yeah, no,
Nasir, before I go to the next segment, I just wanted to ask, if I'm right now an upcoming artist or an aspiring artist, what advice would you like to give them?
I think the most important thing an artist can have if they want to succeed nowadays is the ability to maintain drive and self-accountability. I think at the end of the day, all the tools that you need to succeed are publicly available and affordable. So I want to reiterate, if it's not working for you, I understand that luck plays into a game, but luck factors in to becoming a superstar. It doesn't factor in to becoming a reasonably established artist. So if it's not working for you, if you're not hitting certain milestones early on, you're doing something wrong. And it's important to be able to look in the mirror and say that, because maybe the most important piece of advice that was said to me is know how good you are, not just in the positive sense, in the negative sense. If you overestimate your ability in this point in time, you're cutting your feet from under you because you're stopping yourself from improving. And if you're calling yourself worse than you are, then you're walking the path twice. You know what I mean? So it's about being honest with yourself, being accountable to yourself, and making sure that you understand that if there's an issue in front of you, chances are you are the person who needs to solve it. And I think that having that attitude, this is not 100% the truth, but this is the mentality that I would adopt. It's a mindset. If there's a solution to be found, I'm the one who needs to find it. Because A, that puts you in control of your career. B, it makes sure that your career is in your image. But C, it means you're not held hostage to anybody else. And let's say you have a dope producer, a dope filmographer. Suddenly, those people become a crutch if you aren't the one driving it, as opposed to a helping hand. They'll only take you to where they are, but you can't surpass them.
I love that. And it's so important for anyone who's listening, whether you're an artist or not, to know and realize that you are the driving force of whatever you want to achieve.
And you're accountable for it.
And you're accountable, because we see it way too many times. You may get a team and you may rely on the team, and maybe the team is not getting you what you want, but you need to drive that team.
And you need to have the answers.
And you need to have the answers.
Yeah.
Another thing you also touched upon is also identifying the problem, which I think is very, very important for anyone who's listening to take note of that, because you can't solve the problem if you don't know what the problem is.
Yeah.
So if the numbers are not where you want them to be, then you have to assess why that is and reassess your strategy maybe.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Nasir. Nasir, I want to now go into the next part of our conversation. And it's a very, very important discussion to have, which is the song Rajieen. What was the experience like putting the song together at such a short period of time?
Yeah. First off, the first thing I need to say is that Rajieen was the ultimate collaboration. The idea came about when a friend of mine, Hayat Abu Samra, hit me up and was like, hey, like, you think we could like do a local collab of a couple of artists, just kind of try and put the message out there? And I was like, sure, that would be great. And what I didn't expect was how quickly that would snowball into what it became. Because we just started texting artists from, locally and then the region, and the answers were immediately yes. And it was very quickly. So let me put it. So it was Hayat, myself, Farah Hourani, and Omar Rammal, who kind of just started brainstorming, okay, so how do we kind of start putting this out there? But it quickly became a project that heavily involved all 25 artists, the entire production team. Everyone was pitching in ideas. And it was so clear that everyone was so focused on kind of not just delivering a message of, I don't like the word solidarity, because it was delivering a message that this is our cause, no matter where we're from in the Arab region. But everyone was also so invested in the project's success. I mean, most phone calls, people wouldn't let me finish the pitch I was making as I was on the phone. So it was just be like, hey guys, we're thinking of doing a song for Pat. And I was like, I'm in. In the case of, for instance, Marwan Musa and Afroto, who I mentioned specifically because Marwan was really helped us reach out to a number of the artists, Marwan and Afroto. Marwan was also a producer on the track. We called them on a Saturday evening at 11 p.m. And if I understand correctly, they had just flown into Egypt and were having dinner with their parents. I'm like, hey, would you guys be down? They were in Amman 10 a.m. the next morning in the studio working on the track. It was one of those moments where it wasn't like, there was no difficulty in getting people on the same page. It was about everyone united in a single front in trying to deliver a message and pour out the immense and complicated emotions that everybody was feeling at the time. Yeah, I feel like that would be a starting point to answer your question.
Well, thank you very much for sharing that. It definitely showed the unity amongst artists. It symbolized the unity amongst us as a community, as a world, fighting against what we're seeing as atrocities unfold in Gaza.
Yeah.
And so thank you again. I wanted to ask, when it comes to the emotion in that room and how you recorded it, can you tell us like what people were feeling? What were the conversations like behind the stage?
Oh, that's a really interesting question. The song Prime was written by myself, Saif Bataine. The core of the song was written by myself, Saif Shrouf, and Saif Bataine. And we kind of laid out a template for all the rest of the artists who then we invited and said, all right, guys, here are the rules. Everybody gets 16 bars. We need to find a way for you to say what you want to say. We needed a cohesive, let's call it umbrella for the track to try and keep everyone on message. But we didn't find that it was our place to censor what anybody wanted to say. We had certain requests that we wanted the song to be about us. It was a song about our strength, our solidarity, our resistance, our anger. but that's what Rajieen was about. It's about, we wanted a message that kind of displays the Palestinian identity, but also the Arab identity. But beyond that, we were like, have at it. And I can't tell you how interesting it was to see artists who had never been in the same room together, correcting each other's verses, kind of being like, hey, what do you think of this melody? What do you think of that lyric? What do you think of, people like throwing ad-libs on each other's verses just because they kind of felt like that was, what the emotion he was going for, but he thought he could add a little bit of spice to that. So if you actually really listen to the song, you have the artists kind of ad-libbing over each other's verses. You have the artists kind of, you might, if you look even really, really specifically, you might hear certain styles one artist is singing that for another artist because maybe they wrote it together. But there was this kind of the spirit of collaboration. There's this idea that we need to get this song out as fast as humanly possible, and everyone is going to do everything within their power to get them there. And I'll tell you personally, I was worried about what it might look like to manage that many artists, many of whom we haven't met, many of whom are, at a later stage in their career than I am. So who am I to kind of like set ground rules? So I was nervous about that, and so was the entire team. How do we communicate with them? How do we kind of make sure that we're not limiting them artistically, but kind of remaining faithful to the soul of the song? That concern was completely misplaced. The idea that there were positions where even artists who were like, artists, saying, cut me out of the song, but I want him to have twice as long on his verse.
That's amazing.
Stuff where it's just like, I can't believe you guys, I've never been in a project where it was just about the message and about the art to that extent. And it was heartwarming. It kind of reinforced my faith in music, reinforced my faith in what we're doing. I'm monologuing, but it's just because I'm just having so many thoughts about the process as we go. But one of the questions every one of us asked ourselves was like this is happening in Palestine. Is there really any point to us being musicians? People are dying. Why am I singing?
Well, this was going to be my follow-up question. And I know you're going to get to it, but I want to ask it is, how can music be a form of resistance?
Yeah, it's maybe the most important thing that I take away from conversations about the Palestinian cause is that remaining is the most important form of resistance. We are here. And the more you think about it, we are here and we will remain here is such a multifaceted thought. It's not just about, staying on the land of Palestine, although this is an immensely, immensely important aspect of the cause itself, but it's about, we are here in expression. We are here in our identity. We are here because of our touch. We are here because of our, in the way that we sing, in the way that we dress. We remain. And that it took me a while to get there with music. But the reality is, when we looked at Rajieen, maybe one of the most important things was that it spoke for people.
It spoke for people.
You know what I mean? And it allowed people to kind of let out their whatever, the multitude of emotions they were feeling at that instant. But also it was an expression of Palestinian resistance in the sense of, this is what we look like. This is how we sing. We can create something beautiful. We can create something creative. We can be happy together. We can be sad together. And music is a central form of expression that allows you to let those things be into the world. So it's about kind of establishing yourself in this world. Absolutely. As a form of communication.
Absolutely. And I love the fact that you said it communicates what people were already feeling, because you're right. There were so many different emotions. And what was beautiful about the song is that it articulated a lot of those emotions. It articulated through words, through different sounds. And then you also said that existing and remaining, right? Is that remaining true to our identity, to our culture, that's also a form of resistance. I wanted to just also ask right now about the music videos. The visuals were beautiful. Everything was perfection in the video, but there was one thing that just caught my eye, and I wanted to ask more about why it was important, which is there was visuals showing the Jewish community in solidarity with the cause. Why was that an important visual for you to put in Rajieen?
So when Hayat, Omar, and Farah were discussing the video, one of the biggest questions was, okay, we're about to shoot a video for this. Is this about the artists? And the answer was a resounding no. And this wasn't just the film team, it was everybody on board the project. Like, this is not about us, let's not make it about us. So we needed to start with a visual representation of the cause we're talking about. Something to say, hey, this immense frustration everyone's feeling, this immense anger, this sadness, this pride that we're feeling at being Palestinian, where does it come from? And we kind of wanted to represent it visually. But then there's the other side of that, is that the concept of being Palestinian has been so polarized over the last 20, 30 years. The idea of, and I would argue deliberately, is that, when you're presented as a Palestinian, or not, maybe less so today, thankfully, but in previous years, there's an image that pops in a non-Arab person's head that's not very pleasant. So one of the concepts this is the importance of presenting specifically Jewish people in solidarity with Palestine, because it's to negate that polarization. The concept of justice for Palestinians is not a call for injustice against anybody else. So if Jewish people who are at the center of this conflict with the Palestinians, specifically Israelis, but they wash it into Judaism, are saying we stand with Palestinians and don't stand with this injustice, then this reveals that, it focuses the light on the concept that the Palestinian issue is a human issue. And standing with Palestine is not standing against Judaism. It's standing against injustice being taken place in this instance. And you hear it it's kind of part of that conversation where everyone's saying being pro-Palestinian is the same as being anti-Semitic. No, it's not. It's not. And it's in that same vein. The concept is me standing with Palestine is me standing for justice. It's not me calling for the eradication of anybody. And that's kind of where what we were trying to shine light on.
And I love that. And I'm really happy you did, because visuals do speak volumes, and just showing the solidarity. And exactly like you said, this is not about one person's justice at the expense of another. This is justice for all, and humanity comes first. So Nasir, I want to just go into some of the lyrics in the song, because I think I would love to know a little bit more, and I know some of the listeners want to know what went behind the thought process in those lyrics. So I'm going to start off by the chorus. The chorus says in Rajieen is, "But the key to my home is in my heart, and I'm returning with my children in my arms. Even if the whole world stands against me, I am returning. Oh, my country, I am returning." And just again, for just a little context, this is the English translation of the Arabic lyrics. So for those who don't know, what is the key the song refers to?
During the Nakba, when hundreds of thousands of Palestinians were displaced from their homes, many of them, if not the majority, thought they were leaving for a short period and coming back. And so many of them locked their house keys, took their house keys with them, and then left, as if it was just like we're fleeing the scene, not fleeing, just going to safety for a couple of days, maybe a couple of weeks, and then coming back. those keys still remain with their owners to this day, and with grandparents. I mean, my grandparents have them. Islam's grandparents have them. And I'm assuming many of the artists who are Palestinians still have the keys to their houses in whichever part of Palestine they were living in prior to the Nakba. And so it's become a symbol of resistance and of solidarity with Palestinian cause, because the idea is that, hey, this is the key, and this is my attachment to my right to return to my homeland, hopefully in the not too distant future. The idea of we will return, there was an Israeli prime minister named Golda Meir, who said, the grandparents will die and the grandchildren will forget. And the concept of saying, I, the grandson, still have the key and I will return, is kind of saying, well, hey, first off, my grandparents are still with me, but I haven't forgotten this cause, and this remains my cause. And we felt like it was just the central representation of how we feel about Palestine and how strongly we feel about the cause in general.
I love that. That gave me some goosebumps right there, because you're right. There is this rhetoric that the children and the grandchildren will forget, and if anything, the grandchildren and the children have become stronger and have become more passionate about the cause.
Here's a stat for you. I think 22 of the 25 artists were born after the Oslo Accords. Or 25 artists who were on the song were born after the Oslo Accords. They never knew Palestine before the Nakba. They never knew, they never saw the Palestine they were, but it's still that central cause. For me, that was mind blowing.
That's a good fact.
Yeah.
Okay, well, thank you very much for sharing that. I want to go to the next line when it comes to the song that I'd love to talk a little bit more about. So again, this is the English translation. It says, you call me a terrorist. I ask you if you're an occupier. And then you say, sorry that I'm not from Ukraine. Sorry that my skin is not white. Sorry to my children that I brought you in the hypocritical and unfair world. Mm-hmm. What did you want people to feel or think with those lines?
Well, first off, those verses were written because you talk about Saif Batayna's verse and Umar Ramad's verse, who, those were the parts where we weren't ready. So I'm going to be speaking on someone else's behalf. There is, in Batayna's part where he's talking about, you call me a terrorist, well, I ask you if you're an occupier. Which translated in Arabic, it was slightly different. It says, "Tsalni min irhabi, jay yaqul lak min badi." It's like, well, why? If you're going to call me a terrorist, are you not going to stop and think why, we had to do what we had to do, but also why you feel compelled to paint me in this light? I mean, terrorist is such a loosely thrown around word these days, but I mean, Nelson Mandela was called a terrorist until he fought for his freedom. So the question here is trying to ask, it's so easy for you being, whoever the opposite party is of this conversation, not this conversation, but the conversation about Palestine, to call me a terrorist. But do you not, well, why am I forced to take these actions? Why am I in a position where I need to use violence to justify my existence? It's not, I'm not born this way. We are resisting something. Something is forcing me to do this. What's that? And that's kind of what I would assume where that question comes from. With regards to Umar's verse, Umar's verse has a story that I can't tell right now, but I will tell at a later time. But there is this general feeling where people tend to be picky as to whose suffering matters more. I think Chris Tucker called it selective outrage, but in a very different context. And it's a dangerous game to play, I would suppose. It's because on the one hand, there is this sentiment where, what's happening in Ukraine is devastating, but I'm certain that a Palestinian must also feel relatively devastated to feel like, hey, is my suffering any less legitimate because I don't look a certain way, or if I'm not from a certain place, or because the country I'm in is not in a certain alliance? Like the question that like we saw the world stop for Ukraine, rightly so, and yet the Palestinians haven't just been dying. I mean, this isn't about the 7th of October. You know, it's not like this started last year.
Yeah.
It's been 75 years, if not more. What do Palestinians need to look like for you to care?
I'm so happy you mentioned that and you articulated this perfectly, because you're right. That was a devastating thing. That is a devastating thing that's happening to the Ukrainian people, but it's also happening to Palestinians, and we see how the world is reacting, especially in the beginning, where I don't even think they turned a blind eye. I think they tried to even paint Palestinians as barbaric and without the context and without understanding what is actually happening.
It's 100% on point. It's dehumanizing Palestinians, and it's why actually your question about asking, you know, the ask me if I'm a terrorist, and I'll ask you if you're an occupier, and the lines on sorry I'm not from Ukraine, they go hand in hand. You know what I mean? Like, it's because this is causing this, and it was one of the reasons that we put them behind each other actually in the song.
I love that. I remember when I was even listening to the song to pick like a line, and I was like, oh, this is, those two lines do go very well together, and it does make sense. So yes, great job. What was a line that resonated with you the most in that song?
Okay, there's a phrase actually that's said that every time it's said kind of catches the Palestinian cause for me. You know, صوتي حياة.
صوتي حياة.
Yes, my voice is life, and that we replay back into that at the end when we say لو رحل صوتي ما بترحل حناجركم, which is actually a song that was written ages ago. But kind of the idea that is like the mere idea that I'm speaking is an affirmation of my existence, and it's, for me, it just fills me with pride on a number of levels, because on one front you have the idea that, listen, we're expressing ourselves. You see how effective Instagram has been in resistance, in expanding on the cause. But it also, and this is just the part of me that's just like, try me. The idea is like, the bar you need to get to in order to I mean, I don't want to have, if you want to exterminate the Palestinians, you need to get them to a point where they can't even speak, you know, because they'll never stop. And for me, that's just, it fills me with so much pride, and just kind of like, this is just a guttural kind of emotional
I love that.
reaction to that. Like, you know, you're not, you can't.
Our voice is life.
As long as one person can speak, the Palestinians live.
That is that's another bar right there. Thank you very much for sharing that.
Cheers.
The last part of the conversation, I want to just take this to the time that Rajieen was released. Also, an Israeli song was released, and it actually climbed to #1 in Israel, and it's called Harbu Darbu, which I think in Arabic it translates to raining hell on one's opponent. So along with glorifying the murders of Palestinians, it also called on the death of celebrities like Bella Hadid, Dua Lipa, and even Mia Khalifa. And I wanted to ask, what do you want to tell the music producers of that song? As a music producer yourself.
I do want to say thank you to them, because I think it's a lot easier to believe what we're saying when you have a counterpart that's in function and form representing the oppression that we've been discussing in the song come out only 2 days later, almost unashamedly. If anything, I appreciate its existence, because it only goes to help us kind of solidify our point.
Yeah, and it's very interesting, because you have one song, Rajieen, which is singing about unity, it's singing about peace, it's singing about resistance to it, and resistance in all its forms, which is actually existing. And like you said, having a voice and keep speaking up. And then a song that like blatantly and clearly would just call for destruction. And what I find very interesting, so that song, the Israeli song, peaked at #1 or reached #1 in Israel. And still, music platform, still Spotify has it. And I wanted to ask you, just as a music producer and someone in the music industry, what do you think that says about our industry?
We were shadow banned when we first released Rajieen.
Oh my God.
You know, we struggled to get the track out on YouTube. For almost 3 weeks, we couldn't find, if you search a song, you couldn't find it on page 1. It would be on page 7. Although the song hit like hundreds of thousands of views within the first couple of hours of its release. But we had to rely on core fans, people who just believed in the cause to spread the song around because it was so difficult to find the song itself when you're looking for it. And then on the other hand, you have Harb al-Darb that peaked at #1 because it was kind of, it was an open path, let's call it. So I have there's no illusion in my mind that there is definitely one voice that's protected more than the other. But that kind of also just fills me with pride, again, because Rajieen made its circles around the world, despite every obstacle thrown in its path. And it just seems to be quite the apt metaphor for the path every Palestinian needs to take to be seen anywhere. Although this is, I'm not diluting that. And meanwhile, Harb al-Darb kind of just shows you that, hey, listen, if we want it there, it'll be there. But what does that really stand for? And at the end of the day, I think when you ask someone if they know Rajieen, they'll probably say yes. But if you ask them if they know Harb al-Darb, I highly doubt that the answer would be as emphatic.
Oh, imagine you ask that question and someone says they know Harb al-Darb and they start listening to it. No, and they start listening to it. Yo, I'd be kind of scared. I'd be like, I don't know if I want to be around this person. So, it's a little too violent.
For my taste.
Yeah.
It's unbelievable.
Yeah. So Nasir, I want to first and foremost thank you again and again for being on Yalla's Talk, for allowing us to be at your beautiful studio.
Thank you guys for coming here. It was an absolute pleasure. And to keep telling you again, I think what you guys are doing is so, so important.
I appreciate it. And likewise, man. Likewise, we're changing the narrative in different ways and everyone's doing their part. And this whole entire conversation, what's interesting about this conversation is we went and we talked about what the music scene looks like in the Middle East and North Africa region, the different genres, advice and tips for artists. But what we also discussed is Rajieen. We talked about Rajieen, a song that's a form of resistance. Music can be a form of resistance. And also what some of the quotes and some of the lines actually mean. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Nasir, before I leave this off, 2 last questions I have for you.
Hit me.
First one, is there going to be a Rajieen part 2?
Not in the same way, because Rajieen was never about the artist and it's not about us, and we don't want to make it that way. So the song represented a moment. If there is another moment, we'll let the song materialize on its own, but I don't think it's in anyone's interest for us to just double down on it. But I'm very happy to say that most, if not all, the artists have kind of carried the spirit of Rajieen into their own separate projects.
I love that.
So that I'm sure you will see as time comes forward.
I love that. And then the last question I have for you is because right now, rightfully so, we're seeing a lot of these artists integrate Palestine and integrate the cause into their music. If you can give those artists one piece of advice as someone who's produced a song about the cause, what would that advice be? The
song, it's always the same, but I think the 2 most important pieces of advice are be authentic and be brave. I think now is the time to speak. Now is the time to say the things that you may or may not have been afraid of a little bit early on. So I mentioned earlier, the machine wants you to say a certain thing. it may be scary to say, just to realize that if you say a certain thing, you may find yourself on the wrong side of that machine. But I think that it's artists, amongst others, are vessels who are allowing others to find the courage to use their voice. So if you're thinking about it, I think now's the time to do it.
This is the time to do it.
Yeah.
And be brave and be authentic.
Yeah.
Nasir, thank you so much for coming on Yalla Let's Talk. For those who are listening today, if you enjoyed this episode, please do share it with a friend. And don't forget to follow Vibe with Nasir and Yalla by